Good evening. I'm John Bailey, and this is People to be Heard, the program where people have something to say, have their say. And tonight, you've got John Sheehan, president of the Gedney Association, with us, hard on the heels of the Gedney Association, and two other individuals are mounting an Article 78 against the Common Council approval of the French American School of New York school campus that was planned to be constructed on the former Ridgeway Country Club. Boy, is that a mouthful. I've been saying it for this is year 7, and welcome to the program, John, coming on at such short notice. Right, so why don't you give us an update? Your suit was filed on December the 5th. Right?
Yes.
And so what is happening now?
Well, as you know, the council had a work session, I think it was the day before Election Day, or no, maybe it was a week before Election Day, and within 1 week they made a decision, and FASNY finally got its 5th vote that they were trying desperately to get. We were very, very unhappy with Councilwoman Hunt Robinson's decision, but also the manner in which she made her decision, using criteria that had nothing to do with the land use question or issue, but private scholarships, which is a salutary thing, but it isn't really a factor in a land use matter or special permit and site plan decision.
I see. Now, was this suit ready to go, or did you have to make some adjustments according
No,
to that
clearly
decision?
we had to make adjustments, and very quick.
Yes.
Because there's not a long period of time between the decision that was made and the filing date. So we, while our attorney kept well aware of what was going on, he needed to do quite a bit of work prior to the submission of that lawsuit.
Right, and your attorney is?
Howard Avertine of Syosset, Long Island.
And you have confidence because I understand he's well versed in these matters.
Yes, he's a well-regarded land use attorney, zoning attorney, and environmental questions too. He's an expert in that, and we searched all over the metropolitan area for someone who had that capability.
Now, the suit revolves primarily around the segmentation issue. Could you explain that?
The suit there's really two components of our lawsuit. One is the Article 78 matters, and you mentioned segmentation. Segmentation sounds like a complicated word, but it really means a developer can't just offer a plan for part of the property. They have to really tell you what they intend to do for the whole remainder of the property, as did FASNY in the original application. In this application, FASNY was silent on what might be developed on the remainder of the property. They did kind of indicate that there may be private development, not school development. So under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, a developer has to really show what the cumulative impact of development of the entire property is. That's the only way a deciding body, in this case the Common Council, can make a real educated decision.
Now,
but the other, I should say, there's also, which is
the
paramount in our belief and all our neighbors, is the safety issue.
Okay.
If you recall, Councilman Hunt Robinson mentioned that at the work session, unresolved safety issues. That was why she turned down FASNY in the earlier application. But interestingly, in her final decision, she didn't mention safety. It was out the window. So we think that's a very problematical thing that she and the council did. We spent a lot of money having independent, objective analyses done by traffic engineers, fire safety experts, and the Common Council never used their former traffic consultant, which earlier had recommended against Ridgeway as an entrance to the school entirely.
That was where it was originally, then they switched it to North Street,
Right.
and then we returned to Ridgeway.
Right, and they finally, I think Councilman Lacuna said, can we have some analysis by these people? Interestingly, just before the decision, this firm sent a 2-paragraph letter to the city saying, it looks okay. So that's no analysis, and it was really embarrassing how bad it was.
Mm-hmm. Didn't this whole thing develop because they said that it could be environmentally mitigated when they made the original approval of the final environmental impact statement? Was that the time to turn it down, in your opinion?
Yes, yes. Our mayor was committed to approving this project, and obviously FASNY was too. FASNY went actually to the Ministers Association to get their recommendation, and I met with the president of the Ministers Association, and he said, we got concessions for our sign-off on the, and I was shocked he said that, but one of the concessions was these scholarships.
Yeah, how many?
Councilman Hunt Robinson's husband is a minister, area minister. It really, the whole thing looks very unseemly to our eyes.
Well, the scholarships remain to be seen. That's a very inexpensive thing for FASNY to.
And that's fine. I think it's wonderful that all private schools offer scholarships to less fortunate or financially needy students. That's great. I told the minister, the president of the Ministers Association, I would march with him on some other private schools to see if they would do that. But you don't do that in a land use dispute in the middle of it, because it looks like you're really trying to procure a vote through means that are not part of the normal process.
Saying that.
I'm sorry?
Not that we're actually saying that, but it looks like, right?
Well, I know that FASNY is a very sophisticated, kind of unusual for a nonprofit, a very aggressive group. Hired a PR firm that conducted a very nasty campaign against people in our neighborhood. So I was surprised, and I frankly thought Councilman Hunt Robinson would be embarrassed by this and shocked that they tried to eliminate her vote when they said it was not an environmentally sensitive site.
Right.
You recall that.
Yes,
You think she
I
would
do.
resent that.
Yeah.
But obviously this had some effect on her, because she did mention this as a component in her analysis of her decision, which again is outside, a wonderful thing, but it's outside what is really one of the standards one can consider in making a decision of this kind.
Yes. Now your Article 78, which is filed against the Common Council,
Yes.
and you were asking the court to just overturn their approval,
Yes.
correct? And what do you expect to happen after that? Do you have to go back to the drawing board?
We believe there's very valid things in there. There's the second component, which is outside the Article 78, is there's a deed restriction on the property
Yes,
that
I was gonna
prohibits
get to that, yeah. The
use
covenant.
of this land for anything other than a golf course or related club facilities or private homes.
Yes.
And
And
FASNY neglected
institutions
that
being the key word, right?
institution,
Institutions,
right. You
yeah.
cannot have institutional use. So FASNY ignored this. I don't know if they bought the property with very little analysis, as I understand it, and I think not much thought was given into the ramifications of deed restrictions. People bought properties in Gedney farms and checked that out. So that is something, you know, because everybody's concerned, what if a golf club goes defunct? What happens to it?
Yes.
Interestingly, I was looking back at some of our papers. The people who essentially led the charge killing the idea of the city buying it was, again, Tom Roach, Mayor Tom Roach, in a city where we have an inadequate supply of open space, and Beth Smeda. She's saying the town couldn't afford it. It's interesting, I was saying today to someone, Stamford, which is a much larger city than us in Connecticut, has 2 public golf courses. Rye has one, Greenwich, Eastchester. It would have preserved a lot of open space. Even if it wasn't a golf course, it would have been a very useful
public
amenity.
courses.
Public.
Yes.
Now, the conservation area, which is a very loosey-goosey thing that the FASNY is proposing to save, is essentially non-developable land, a lake and pond and wetlands, which they talk about how wonderful it is, but it would have never been developed anyway.
Well, what intrigues me about that whole conservation area is how are they going to maintain it? Are they just going to let the grasses grow as it would in the wild, so it would really be a nature conserve, or are they going to cut the grass? Nobody has addressed that issue for some time.
They haven't really maintained the course, and when there was a decision pending, they ran in and cut the grass, picked up trees, crossing roads, and so on and so forth. But otherwise, they haven't really done much with to maintain the property.
Yeah,
so
but
who knows?
It still looks neat, though, to an extent.
To an extent.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't look wild and overgrown, but
if you looked at the pond,
I know what a field looks like.
There's a layer of for the last few years. There's been a layer of scum on the pond.
Absolutely,
that's been
we pointed
disgraceful.
that out,
yes.
and we showed it, and the environmental people in Westchester came and said, no, there's no mosquitoes there.
Right.
And so, but it does not look pretty, and it certainly is a problem.
Right.
They aerate it, but it isn't really doing the job. But
And nothing. They never did anything with the dam.
No.
There's an earthen dam there that is very unstable, and the state came in and said you have to make certain improvements, but that's never been done either. But where's the enforcement?
Well, the problem is that nowhere in, I believe, the final legislation approved by the council does it describe what the maintenance of the conservation area will be and
Right.
how it will be maintained or what the city expects. Am I right?
The city has made, floundered in my view, in their review of this entire project, but said, "Oh, we spent 7 years," but they never gave it the rigorous review that they've given to other developments over the years. And there's a lot. Look at this main issue about use of Ridgeway. The environmental findings during the secret process said you cannot use Ridgeway. This is the Common Council.
Yeah.
For many different reasons. It never said, it's unacceptable for 950, but 640 students, it's acceptable. They said it was unacceptable. The comprehensive plan calls it being a local collector for only local residents and deliveries to local residents. Mm-hmm. It's a 2-lane road, no shoulder. The neighborhood, local streets are going to be like Swiss cheese. John, you drive Ridgeway quite often. Mm-hmm. Many days now at 4:30 in the afternoon, it backs up from Amerenik Avenue all the way to the former Ridgeway Country Club.
Mm-hmm. Why?
You're going to add, if you're adding close to 1,000, over 500 cars during that rush hour, what do you think it's going to be like? It's chaos.
Well, White Plains traffic is a lot more than it used to be everywhere.
It's a lot more on Ridgeway since the environmental findings were done. Mm-hmm. So the Common Council did an about-face. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, the middle and high school, which they said we're going to cut it from 950 to 640. Mm-hmm. The students for the middle and high school, the population has actually been increased. A lot of people don't know that, from 478 to 640. And within that group of people, there's going to be more kids driving. Before it was preschool and elementary school. Their parents, or they take buses, or more of them would be on bus. Here you have more potential student drivers, so more traffic. But that wasn't considered either. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of outside pressures, John, as you know, very strong financial, Mrs. Columball, for an example, very, very, she had seen it cuts in writing letters saying it was a ditch, and they never visited the site. Mm-hmm. It was a joke, really a joke, because we reviewed this very, very carefully. There were a lot of things in this whole review process that really smell.
Now, but getting back to your Article 78 cert, it asks it to be overturned. Now, if they overturn it, what has to happen?
Well, the Article 78 is going to be heard by the same judge, and she has not been, she's been, in my view, very supportive of FASNY. She issued a preliminary decision a preliminary decision when she didn't even have the city's record when they turned down FASNY earlier.
It's Case, isn't it?
No, this is
It was
Judge
Case
Lefkowitz.
on
Case is the
It's going back to Lefkowitz.
Yes, it's going back to Lefkowitz, and Lefkowitz is the one who issued a preliminary decision, which I don't know what that is, before she even had the city's full record supporting FASNY and saying the city was holding them up. But as you know, John, the mayor was doing everything but possible to help FASNY move along.
Okay, so that is an interesting news development because according to the calendar it was supposed to be Case and now it's back to Lefkowitz.
Yes.
I see, okay. So, but that really sheds a new light on it because that should she side with the city again?
Well, she was part of the stipulation too, so she was trying to, she's also the settlement judge for the county. She tries to bring parties in and settle before there is litigation.
I see.
So she was very much involved in the stipulation, so I find it odd that she's going to be able to, really objectively hear our lawsuit.
Should she not change her mind and say,
I would
this
hope
looks
that
good,
she would recuse
it's grounds
herself.
for appeal there.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a concern.
Well,
to
there's
us.
always grounds for appeal, but
it'll be a long, long process.
I see. Now, your letter to the Gedney Association this week asks for donations. How are you going to finance this long, long drive?
We have raised substantial amounts of money in the past, as you know, John, in this entire process, hiring experts. The city, unfortunately, held back, the mayor's office held back a environmental report by Beth Evans, a local that they engaged, basically saying this site was environmentally sensitive, but they held it back, didn't publicize it until 3 months later, but so we were forced to hire an environmental consultant to counter FASNY's assertion that this was not an environmentally sensitive site. Of course, we prevailed, but the mayor held back at least 2 reports he had done, which added to our fees. We had to hire a lawyer throughout the whole process, some of the other motions we made. And we've been fortunate in having some very generous neighbors who have supported us throughout the city financially, and we are reaching out to them right now, and the donations have been coming in, frankly, very well.
Okay, very good. Now, I was wondering if you could, are we still going to court on the 19th of January, or has that been moved up?
I believe there's a conference scheduled. Judge Lefkowitz wanted a conference with the lawyers on the lawsuit on the 20th, I believe, December 20th. I don't know what
it's coming up,
what she's planning, but it's going to be a long process. The interesting thing too, no matter how this ends up, if FASNY does ever build here, can you imagine?
Take a long time.
Well,
yeah.
They're going to have a very unhappy, you want to have neighbors that but they've treated us very, very shabbily, unusually so. Most nonprofits would have left when the community, the majority of the community didn't want them. There were people who legitimately thought it was a good idea, but the majority of residents didn't want them, didn't want this facility, and it was too big, traffic implication, the worst thing. But there's going to be people counting cars in our neighborhood, I guarantee you. You know some of the people who live around FASNY. They will be watching them daily to see that they don't exceed whatever the number of vehicles they are allowed to have come in the morning and afternoon peak, to make sure no one drives up Gedney Esplanade. They have a very unhappy group of neighbors.
Now, part of this approval is that they essentially can't really develop for 15 years.
That's false. By the way,
No.
Again, Councilman Hunt Robinson was very pleased that they agreed to. She wanted 50-year moratorium, but they had obviously some discussions prior to the final vote where they said, we'll agree not to develop any school facility for 15 years. The word was school facilities, FASNY facility. It doesn't mean they can't try to develop for instance, Burke.
Or sell it off.
Sell it off to like a Burke.
Yeah,
Burke.
right.
By the way, interestingly, in Parcel C, they took the, the mayor is so strong on getting these bike paths all over the city, and he wanted bike paths all over. Interestingly, one of the bike paths on Parcel C was removed. Why was it removed? The mayor didn't object. No whimper from him. But why is that? Maybe they have a plan to sell that. Do they have a plan to sell it to another large institutional use like Burke, which is already having tremendous number of cars cutting through our neighborhood, which we are very concerned with, and we
And
intend
they're
to speak
setting
to Burke
up
about that.
an outpatient facility now. They
Yes.
announced that in the last 2 weeks.
Yes, the cars come in off Bryan, fly down Heather Bloom Road every morning, and cut into the Burke Foundation property.
I was wondering why I was seeing so much traffic on the sleepy Esplanade.
Yes, yes. Well, and that's on Heather
Previously
Bloom.
sleepy Esplanade.
Right. Well, now if Ridgeway is going to be as congested as we suspect it will be if FASNY were to build,
There's going to be more of that.
who's not going to try to come up Gedney Esplanade and cut up through that way and have their kids run across the
Go
parking
down
lot?
Hathaway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it'll be monitored, and that kind of we will not tolerate it. And
Yeah. The
and it
first
would
time
be-
you have a serious accident in which a walking student or someone is seriously hurt.
We have a lot of young children. This is what I thought was so interesting. I think it's great that FASNY was willing to provide a number of scholarships. And Councilman Hunt Robinson was so excited about that. But what about our children who ride their bicycles, walk on our streets with no sidewalks, and they're narrow? What happens?
no bike
Who's
paths
going to be
on Ridgeway,
responsible for if there's one child maimed or, for God's sakes, hopefully not killed? Who's responsible for that?
Right. And you can go back to that approval.
Yes. Well, I think the mayor and the Common Council had every right under protecting the health, safety, and welfare of a community in turning this down. You can turn down schools when it has that impact, but they turn their back on us, and they turn their back on both the secret law and the Cornell decision, which said you can, with regard to schools, you can turn them down if it affects the health, safety, and welfare of a community.
So at this point, though, when you're thinking ahead, suppose you can't appeal. It goes all the way up to Janet DiFiore in the highest court in the state, and the whole approval is upheld. So then, how long do you think it will take them to build it? Do they have the money?
That has not been one
That
of
is
our.
the problem. It's a 10.
I have
think
no
it's
idea
a 10-year project.
if they have the money. I do know. It's interesting. Many of their students, the families, come from France. They're here for 3, 5, 7 years. Are they going to be writing gigantic checks to a school they'll never see again? Maybe. Who knows? But there's a smaller group of U.S. people who attend the school, and obviously with George Soros' daughter and others, some people with some deep pockets. But I think it's going to be a lot more expensive to develop that site. You remember there's a sewer that runs, the sewer for a good part of Gedney Farms runs under Parcel A.
You've still got the flooding problem.
And
right?
you have a flooding issue. If you look back at some of the documents the city did when they considered preserving this as a recreational zone property, this is part of the Mamaroneck watershed, river watershed, and they're really maxing out the development. There's essentially the coverage of this is pretty much the whole thing with buildings, parking lots, and ball fields.
And not, well, be that as it may, this is what we have now going forward. Now, there is a portion of the suit that talks about declining real estate values. But why do you see these declining?
Well, during the earlier process, before FASNY was turned down, real estate values definitely went down. As a matter of fact, I think it was John Body, their facilities member of the board, acknowledged it. And he said, because it's the uncertainty. And everybody looked around and said, yeah, there was. He said, because it's either going to be, you know, residential development or FASNY or a golf course or whatever. But yeah, the uncertainty is FASNY. If it was going to be single-family homes or some form of open space, whether a private golf course or a city golf course or a park, that wasn't going to affect values. But a school that affects your local access to your roads and the density of it absolutely will. Don't forget, we have more land dedicated in this area to institutional use than to residential use already. It's becoming like North Street, where North Street is it's a residentially zoned street, but good part of it from the former St. Agnes Hospital all the way up to Bryant is, or up to the high school, public high school, is institutional use.
Right. Now, looking ahead, how do you see this going? You really feel you can take this all the way up to every level of appeal?
Yes.
You do. I see.
Yes.
And secondly, I would like to say, isn't this a very pivotal type decision? Because if Lefkowitz says, no, this is great, you're being ridiculous, and they've done all they can as far as this goes, that basically means the
it wouldn't
covenants
surprise me,
are
given
dead.
her earlier
Covenants
decisions.
are dead, and it really opens up the way for a lot more abuse of developing private properties.
Absolutely. This will have there's some significant issues here for land use generally. And, you know, this other area, which is really outside the Article 78, the private deed restriction. And while I'm not a lawyer, I would think that should be severed from, that's a separate really issue.
Is it the law or is it not the law? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
Deed restrictions, they run with the land, not with who buys it. And, you know.
Okay, well, let's see, last few seconds of the program, anything you further want to say?
I'd like to thank all the people, especially in the south end of the city, the associations, the North Street area Civic Association, Rosedale, the people in the Gedney Association, Gedney Circle, and all the other associations throughout the city that have supported us, including Battle Hill, Fisher Hill, Carhart. These are more close. I must say I'm very disappointed. The Highlands Association stood out for a group that really turned its head from us, and someday they'll need the support of their neighborhood associations, and I think they've made a big mistake.
Right. John Sheehan of the Gedney Association, you have been heard. John Bailey saying good night for People to Be Heard.
Thank you.